United Nations declared the year 2023 as the International Year of Millets. Underscoring the importance of millets as staples in mitigating food insecurity of rural, urban, and tribal households is of great relevance. The session emphasizes millet's contributions to the Indian diet and its relevance to reducing the climate change challenges, including its carbon footprint. To lead this session, we have with us today Dr. Mansi Patil. Ma'am, I invite you to please sit on the stage. Dr. Mansi Patil serves as the Chief Program Officer for the Hypertension Core Group at the Indian Association for Parenteral and Enteral Nutrition. She holds a PhD in Health, Safety and Environment from the University of Tomorrow in Dehradun and an MSc in Clinical Nutrition from the University of Pune in India. Currently, Ma'am is a committee lead for women in hypertension at the International Society of Hypertension. She is also a committee member for the American Society of Preventive Cardiology and a national committee member for IAPA in India. Additionally, Dr. Mansi is a faculty member at both Maharashtra University of Health Sciences in India and Victoria University in Australia. With her extensive expertise in health science and nutrition, Dr. Mansi is a highly regarded professional in her field. It's an honor to have you here with us today, ma'am. Over to you.
At the outset, I'd like to thank the organizing team for a seamless experience and for having me here today. When you talk about, let's say all of you being very young, when you go out with a group of friends, what kind of food or what is the food that you really order? Don't give me something like, we order millet dosa, because I'm very, very sure you don't. And that I know because I also would not. So what is it that you're ordering? Come on, any 2-3 of you at least. Pizza? Burger maybe, French fries, noodles, paneer tikka, right, absolutely. So when we go out, when we order, one of the biggest challenge, even if we want to order something healthy, there are, maybe that's what is called as food psychology, is one, the availability. Does that shop have something that is healthy? Second, when you're with your group of friends, and I have faced this. There's a group of friends and we go out, let's say we just order tea. And I'll end up saying, okay, I want tea without sugar. The first question that comes up is, are you diabetic? Right? It's not that it is a healthier choice that I'm making. If I say that I want green tea, then the question is, acha, you are a food freak, you're a fitness freak. It's not somehow, as a community, we have not been able to accept a healthy behavior. We have glamorized being unhealthy so much that even if I tell you that I don't exercise very often, people would say, yeah, I understand you're working. That's the truth of my life, but and that's not justifiable. It's absolutely not justifiable. Now, when we talk about millets, it is not just information that is going to be important. Inculcating it into our behavior, and until and unless we do it as professionals, our prescription that goes out is not possible. Unless I have tried it, I have seen what works, what does not work, it's not going to work out. It's something like me telling someone, atta, the wheat flour that's there, you add it to water and you drink it. Someone who does not know how wheat flour is used will never be able to prescribe it. It's not possible to drink that 1 glass of wheat flour. Whereas if you have, let's say, sattu, that's possible. So trying out is important. When we talk about food security, when we talk about millets, the first question we need to ask is millet the solution to food insecurity for our country? I'll restrict to India, but is it the solution? So no, it is one of the solutions that we are looking at. Hopefully, it would, let's say 15 years, 10 years down the line, work out for us. but it is not the only solution. So one, as a person who's also practicing nutrition, don't overdo millets. Don't try and shift a person to a completely millet based diet out of nowhere. Today, if you are not consuming millets, I cannot say, okay, from tomorrow onwards, stop wheat, stop rice, and have only millets. It's a process. It's a process structurally for the country. It's a systematic process to change dietary habits as well. When we talk about food security, when we talk about millets, again, a concept of food psychology comes in. Millets was proposed as a poor man's diet. So, whenever the economic standards went up, economically we became stronger, we started choosing a richer man's diet, right? So, this concept or this ideology also somewhere needs a change. And hence, when we say that we need to shift to a millet-based diet, we need to promote millets, it is not only about the physical availability of millets or the accessibility of millets. It is about how we perceive the food. For example, let's say there's a conference, and I've experienced this again, especially foreign conferences when you go internationally. At the gala dinner, they'll serve alcohol. And you probably will end up being one of those few people who say, no, I don't consume alcohol. And then they'll say, no, this is only wine. Similarly, when you go and opt for millets, mentally, you need to be very, very prepared to take these comments. This is your choice. And until and unless you are sure about this, trust me, prescribing millets, suggesting millets will not happen. So let's start with changing that psychology for ourselves and for people around us. Now, millets, food security, we've been talking a lot about it. But what we realize is it is not as simple. It is not just that I don't get food and therefore I'm malnourished. It is, I may not get food, I may not know about healthy foods, I may see that yes, there is a healthy food option, but I am not able to afford it. So it is a milieu of challenges that a person may or may not face. When we say that we need to promote millets, as the esteemed speaker before me mentioned, it has to be regional choices as well. We need to identify why are they not able to incorporate it. It's as simple, if you tell a South Indian, please stop consumption of rice completely. It is not very feasible. It's a staple diet for them. So the way you incorporate it is also something that we need to look at. Now, when you look at food security, when you look at achieving food security, basically, you need to identify why is this population insecure. Is it because they do not know what the health benefits are? Is there a behavioral challenge, like we talked about food psychology? Is that a challenge? Is it a social challenge? What kind of challenges are they facing, because of which the community as a whole probably lands up being food insecure? Until and unless we identify this, it is not going to be helpful. The way we've seen, as the previous speaker, we had her giving the example of IFA supplementation. We've been giving it, but we have not identified why are the women anemic. So let's go back, identify the core areas where we as a population would face insecurity. From insecurity, again, we cannot transpose factors. We cannot say, okay, this study was done in the US, it's a fantastic study, and that's the reason. In India also we can say that the same things apply. No, they do not, trust me. A study which is local, especially for an Indian scenario, which is a very multi-dimensional, multicultural country, we cannot replicate results from one study to the other. We need to identify what is going wrong here in India for this particular population. And this population is based on the culture, it's based on the age, it's based on the gender, multiple factors. So here, let's say, I'm talking to a younger generation. When I ask all of you a question, the answer would be different as compared to an older generation. So until and unless we identify within India what has gone wrong, we will not be able to give a solution. Now, food insecurity works the same way. If you see, between India and US, India is a very huge producer of millets. So again, the basic question of physical availability itself is different. Traditionally, Indians have consumed millets. So it is not something that is a completely novel idea for us. It is not something that the supply chains are completely lacking for India. For them, they probably have to develop them all over again. So whenever we talk about food security, whenever we talk about introduction of millets, let's focus on Indian-based studies, local studies. It's best as local as you can get. Apart from that, you would see that even though India is a very huge producer of millets, the acceptability of millets had gone down strategically. One of the reasons probably, yes, is Green Revolution. But again, a very simple example. How many of you buy grocery? Oh, that's a huge number. How much does a half kg or a 400-500 gram bread cost? About 40-45 if we are talking about white bread. But how much would a half kg, let's say, apple cost? Or a half kg of millets cost? The cost is much higher. And that gets us back to the point of food security. That gets us back to the point of food systems. Changing our systems on the whole. For a person who probably does not have affordability. Now we are going back not just to psychology but also to the other components where we are talking about affordability. A person who does not have affordability is maybe energy insecure. It's not just micronutrient and protein deficiencies that we are talking about. Because yes, in India, along with the triple burden, within that we also see that a major population of the major group of this population is deficient in energy itself. Now when that happens, their focus would be to buy that white bread and not to buy millets. Their focus is to get energy. It's something like if you have fasted for 2 days, you would not, try and choose foods. You would say, okay, I'm getting this is cheap, and let's say you have only 50 rupees in your pocket, you'll go to a mess probably and order a thali. You will not go to a 5-star hotel because you cannot afford it. So identifying this becomes a major solution for what we want to do ultimately. Now, within India, if you really see, we have a very good production across India of different millets. But that also comes with a challenge, that when we promote millets for food security, can we promote all millets to everyone? We cannot. We again have to go local. We have to identify what kind of millet and what way is this millet being produced or consumed in this community. Therefore, depending on each state, what are the different millets that they are already consuming? It, as a policy as well, it will not really make sense that, if Maharashtra is not producing barnyard, we tell them that, okay, stop bajra and jowar and let's start producing barnyard. Each millet has its own benefits. Each millet will have its own advantages. But yes, locally what is produced, at least as a start, we need to promote that further. Sorry. The different millets I'm sure all of you are now very well aware, since morning we've been talking about millets. So we divide millets into three major parts. You have the major millets, minor millets, and pseudo millets. Major is the jowar, bajra, and ragi, which we hear very, very often, right? Across India, in some form or the other, one of these millets lands up being consumed. I'm talking about a very traditional diet. The minor millets are something that is what we are trying to introduce now. Pseudo millets again becomes they are the ways that you can introduce them in multiple ways, because their leaves are also used, the seeds are also used, so you use pseudo millets in multiple ways that way. Now, when we introduce millets, we also need to remember that millets need to be processed before they are consumed. So when they are at home being consumed, there is a particular procedure for processing millets. But what has happened here is that there is over processing of millets also. So in the market, you will get millets which are over processed, again as a convenience food, because processing millets and then cooking them takes time. You will find that in the market you have those smaller size millets that come, which are very quick to cook. That again becomes a challenge because the UPF consumption goes up. The processed food consumption again is going up. Therefore, nutrition education is important. It is important for us to tell people what kind of millet is important to consume. We cannot just go and say that, okay, you need to start having jowar, you need to start having bajra. You'll have to tell them what is good quality, what kind of millet are you asking. It's as simple, you tell a kid you should consume milk every day, and the child says, I've been consuming. And when you take a dietary recall, they'll say, no, I was consuming Milky Bar. That has milk in it, right? So, but is that what you wanted to say? No. So be clear. The message that goes out, the way we talked about food, the warning labels, the message has to be very precise and it has to be very clear. If you go back to the research, you'll find there are multiple benefits of millets. I have not given the reference now. The simple reason being, there is no one study which gives all benefits. Each study contradicts the other study. I work with hypertension a lot, cardiovascular diseases. So when I read papers only on cardiovascular diseases, depending on the search word that I put in, I get multiple benefits, right, with regards to millets. But ultimately, very few papers, meta-analysis, have actually shown that all millets will give you all of these benefits. So if you have a person with a clinical history, that is also something that you need to cater for. Like we said, this is the diabetic capital of the world. Hypertension is 1 in 3. 1 in 3 people are hypertensive. So with these diseases, which millet serves best? We need to also understand that a person suffering from renal diseases is, for those people, millets is not something that is suitable. Now, if we make a blanket statement that let us all shift to millets, are we telling these people which millet, who needs to consume or who does not need to consume? So that nutrition literacy, nutrition education has to be imparted. So this is an image I found. If you read this image, it feels as if, you have millet and you've got everything. You don't need fruits, you don't need pulses, you don't need absolutely anything. You just need to focus on millets. I'm not saying millets is not an important factor. What I'm saying is, let's not rely on Google for our information. Let's be more technical. Let's try and understand when will millets be a factor, when or how to incorporate those millets into our diet, who to prescribe it to or advise it to. Are we talking about just the whole population? Are we talking about a small section of those population? Now there's a very old Kannada saying, okay, this is something that I found on Google because I don't understand Kannada, but it says that the rice eater is weightless like a bird. The one who eats jowar is strong like a wolf, and one who eats ragi remains nirogi, that is, without diseases throughout his life. Now, that is something that is a very small saying, but it conveys a lot. It conveys what each kind of cereal would do. Similarly, probably we need to come up with such more jingles, more concepts, which will give clarity about who needs to consume what. Again, nutritional properties, if we see for millets, we'll see that ragi, we've been discussing that for a long time, has or is a very rich source of calcium. But trust me, I have seen people again go overboard with ragi. And once they do that, if they find a challenge, they will stop ragi completely. Now again, advising how much to give, when to give is important. Ragi indeed is a very rich source of calcium. It should be incorporated in people who are prone for, let's say, osteoporosis or for calcium deficiencies, even for children where the requirements are higher. But when you talk about these things, it is a very specific recommendation that is going out. As half of you at least, people, the girls who are from clinical nutrition background or the nutrition background, would somewhere prescribe ragi, would advise ragi. Do not go about giving a blanket statement of having all millets, especially ragi. And this is something that I've seen people do. Consume all millets, especially ragi. Now, I have no idea how the patient is going to perceive that. So give them the amount, give them the timing, give them what can it be accompanied with. Traditionally, again in India, we combine cereals and pulses and eat. So we are improving the amino acid score for that food. Similar with millets, we combine both of these and then we consume it. Going back a little about food security again, this was more about food psychology, the nutritional aspects of millets. Going back, we see that there are clear benefits of millets that we see when we give it to the community as well, as in from a public health aspect. They are gluten free. We do see that the chances or the incidence of celiac diseases have been reported to be going high. So yes, they are gluten free. They have a better micronutrient profile as compared to the regular cereals that we are consuming. They will be they're supposed to be cheaper, but trust me, when I go to the market, I find that at least in the urban areas, I don't find them to be a cheaper option, especially with all the hoopla that we've had about millets now. So the cost of millet has gone up drastically. But yes, they could be a cheaper option if we have a higher yield coming in. We do see that the environmental impact of millets or the requirements of millets is much lower as compared to wheat and rice. So the water that is required, the kind of soil that is required, millet is a sturdier crop. So that is something that is used, that is beneficial. Also, when you grow millets, you don't need to really do crop rotation a lot. So one millet after the other is something that is possible. So, multiple millets can be grown for the same soil. Instead of, I don't know how many of you remember, we used to do that leguminous crop, and I don't know, is it still there in class 11th and 12th syllabus? It's there? Some of them have just said yes. Okay. So there's this concept of crop rotation, which is not required for millets, and thus it becomes a much better option. And like we had the previous speaker talk about the planetary aspect, that does help there as well. The carbon footprint will go down because of all of these factors. But yes, there are huge challenges with consumption of millet. One is festivals and seasons. But again, the advantage is there are a lot of people who would still consume millets when they are fasting, whereas we don't have other cereals being consumed. We can use that to our advantage. We can promote those millets further. The focus has been on jowar, bajra, and ragi. We need to shift to the minor millets and the pseudo millets, promote them further. We need to tell people that millets can be used as a snack as well. They should not just be the main meals that we are looking at. They could be, let's say, bhakri, especially in Maharashtra, it's very common. So, the incorporation of bhakri is something that could be there. The availability is there, but the acceptability has to be improved. The consistent, it should actually be the shelf life, its consistency here. We need to improve the shelf life of millet flour. If you keep it for very long, it does get rancid. And there are people who would buy, the cereal flour for, let's say, 3 months or 6 months. So that is something that we need to be aware of even when telling patients, because there are people who would buy millet flour and then, mix and match and then come up with their multigrain atta. But then this atta, if kept for a very long time, can get rancid if it has millets in it. The acceptability is very regional. It is very region specific. If you go to the northern parts of India, let's say Punjab, Haryana, Delhi, the acceptability for millets is pretty poor because there's a lot of wheat and rice that gets grown there, and that is what is locally available and hence locally more acceptable. Therefore, again, like I said, based on what is being produced, we need to start promoting that first to improve the acceptability. Until and unless we are region specific, there's no policy, there's nothing that is going to really work out. Again, regionally, if you see, people think of multiple health benefits with respect to millets. There are antioxidants, it has resistant starch, oligosaccharides, healthy lipids. Yes, it has all of these, but we cannot tell them that if you have millets, you are going to be, you are preventing diabetes completely, or you're preventing cardiovascular diseases completely, or you do not need anything else to fulfill your micronutrient demands. You will need to give a very balanced approach in such cases. You need to tell them that it is preventive, but it is not the only solution that we are looking at. Like I mentioned, millets usually being consumed with pulses or legumes gives a better amino acid profile. It gives us a better a better quality protein. The complementary value of protein is what comes into picture here, and that is again something that we need to promote and not promote just the consumption of millets. Now, the nutritional composition, one of the studies that I found which seemed very decent to me is what is given here. You'll find that all of these studies talk about micronutrient profile, and therefore millets has been proposed as one of the major factors when we talk about food insecurity, because it is taking care of micronutrient deficiency as well as your energy and protein deficiency. Also, it takes care of overnutrition, because one, it is very difficult to have a very huge amount of millets. Second, it is very rich in fiber. So your chances for diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, that is what it offsets here. There are quite a few studies, but very few meta-analysis which have spoken about specific nutrients that millets have, which give you benefit for non-communicable diseases. But yes, there are some which do have those. So it is always good to go back and have a look at what has worked well, what kind of benefits have they had. For cardiovascular diseases, I can tell you millets have shown to reduce the systolic blood pressure, especially foxtail millet, but it does not reduce the diastolic blood pressure. Now, in that case, when you are advising it, again, be very clear that, okay, the systolic may come down, but maybe the diastolic would not reduce to a very great extent. Now, that I'm saying, again, it becomes very clinical. But when you're dealing with people, when you're dealing with the community, you'll get a mixed lot. You will not just get healthy people. And now, neither can you, in public health, say that, okay, my focus is just healthy people. All people with diseases, please step aside. We really can't say that. And therefore, be clear with the instructions that are going out. Now, these are a few millets that are of benefit. We have bajra, again, very from Maharashtra. It's one of the major millets. But yes, again, we need to understand between jowar and bajra. Jowar would be more used in Maharashtra when it is summers. Bajra is used when it is more in winters. So again, our prescription is, or for public health advice as well, it is to stay aligned with it. We don't really need to jump, from one to the other and tell them, no, you have to consume both. So that's something that is not really required. But again, bajra does have a higher iron content as compared to the other millets. You have jowar and ragi. Ragi we've already discussed, so I'll skip this. Ragi is essentially a richer source of calcium as compared to the other millets that are there. The jowar that we are talking about is a very good source of vitamin Bs. So most of the other vitamin Bs is something that you will find in jowar, and thus it becomes a good source. Again, since we are looking at all of these, you'll realize that each millet has its own benefits. And hence, consumption of all is important, though from a public health perspective, it is not going to be possible to consume all. So theoretically, it looks very nice that, let's say something like there was a time when people used to advise that, okay, for breakfast you use one oil, for lunch you use the other oil, and third, for dinner you use another oil. Now that is not going to happen actually in reality. This is foxtail millet, which I was talking about, which is very good for lowering the systolic blood pressure. And I'll probably skip a few slides because I have 5 minutes left with me. And this is little millet, again one of the minor millets that we see. Nutraceutical profile we've already discussed. Let's go at the how millets would actually improve the food security for us. So yes, we do see population growth, we see a climate change, water scarcity, and increasing food prices, which do pose a huge threat to the agriculture and the food system worldwide as well as India. Millets are something that cater to all of these 4 aspects and hence become a better option as compared to wheat and rice. Of course, we are looking at the triple burden, overcoming the triple burden with the use of millets. There are 2 major factors why you will find a challenge with millets. One is the demand side of factors, and the other is the supply side. This is more from policy making perspective. This is more from the structural aspect of provision of millets to the masses. So if you look at the supply side of factors, you will see that there's a bottleneck that comes up. There's a production, but the processing and the dissemination is where we are facing a challenge. And that is something that we need to overcome. The demand for processed smaller millets has gone up to a very great extent. So for the supply side, it is important that we address the decreasing trend of area and production through the supply enhancements itself. So we need to look at creating a seed hub for farmers. We cannot just say that, okay, now you start producing millets or you replace your present cereal with millets. We need to have a seed hub where it is available to them throughout the year. They do not have to really invest a lot in advance to procure those seeds. We need to have a systematic channel for distribution throughout the production chain. We have to give remuneration, adequate remuneration to the farmers as well. It is there has to be that monetary incentive that goes down to them. We need to have probably distribution of hybrid quality millets as well if we want to increase the production. We've been talking about demand. We've been talking about prescribing millets, but supplying of millets is the core area. Until and unless we have that, it doesn't make sense telling people to start consuming millets. We also need to talk about what kind of weed management do they need to do. We need to set some minimal sale price to ensure economic stability, to ensure the economic security for farmers. The soil health needs to be evaluated, and we need to tell them what kind of millet is going to work best for their farms. We need to have a multiple stakeholder collaboration to ensure that the millets are produced by the farmers, they get the right benefits out of it, and these millet and the information about millets is disseminated across the country. We also need to see that it is not just short-term concepts that we are looking at. We need to have more long-term strategies. So it has to be a marketing intelligence system, as we put it, where the market determines the demand, it improves the demand, and in turn improves or triggers a higher production of that food material. There has to be better warehouse facilities, because millets also, if you just keep them, they would get spoiled. So you need better warehouse facilities. You need to teach better farming systems and better farming methodologies to the farmers. Until and unless we've done that, like I said, the supply of millets in the market would not be enough. We have demand. We need to have price support policies. We need to look at subsidizing certain food items if we want to promote millets. There has to be social awareness. Like I said, it is not a poor man's crop. It is a healthy man's crop, probably, is what we need to start advising now. We need to incorporate millets into the governmental programs and policies. We need to create awareness at multiple levels, be it for children, be it, let's say, in hotels, the availability of cooked millets. All of this comes into picture when you want to talk about food security, because trust me, food security is not only for the poor. It is not only for people who are, let's say, socio-economically challenged. It is for us as well. If we get a blood test done, if we get the a health checkup done, we will, most of us at least, would land up having a nutritional challenge. So that's something that we need to look at as well. We ultimately need sustainability. Why are we talking about production, supply? We are talking about sustainability. We need better sustainability. We need better information dissemination to go out in the public. Again, probably this is one of the last slides that I have. So when we talk about all of this, one of the first thoughts is, can we have millet biscuits, right? So remember, whenever these contemporary millet-based recipes come into picture, we are processing the millets. We are not opting for the healthier option. So what we need ultimately to improve food security via millets is to have a policy intervention, to talk about international and national outreach, talk about awareness with respect to millets, enhancement of production, productivity, value addition, entrepreneurship, as well as disseminating knowledge about health and the nutrition benefits that millets would have. And yes, I think that's about it. This is again a slide that I came up with. This is an image I found which is circulated very rampantly, and if you trace it back, it does not come from a research paper. So a humble advice, please don't take a picture of this. This should not be used, is what the bottom line for this slide was. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for passionately explaining on us on how and why are these yesterday's coarse grains today's nutri cereals. Now the session is open for question and answers. We'll be taking only 2 question and answers, please.
Good morning. Actually, I want to tell my experience since this is a year of millets. There was a notice from my daughter's school that sent a millet-based recipe. So I had 2-3 problems. First, I didn't find any millet since I was living in not a big city. So ragi was my only option. Second, what should I send for the kids so that it will be palatable? So I just ended up Googled it, and nothing more than a ragi laddu or a ragi chila. So again, that ragi chila was half eaten. So I think that even if we buy millet, there should be some awareness how to make it more palatable for all the age groups, because not everybody will like a bhakri or a porridge. So if again next month, if some notice comes that I don't know what should I send a millet based recipe in my kids tiffin, so I think more awareness should be there, like what to do with that. And second is it little heavier on digestion? Like some dietitian told me that it dehydrates the body a little bit, so you need to consume more water. I don't know.
So it has higher amount of fiber. I'll come to the first experience of yours later, but it has a higher amount of fiber. So if you're consuming millets, you will need to consume more water. Comparatively more water. We are not saying you need to consume maybe 5 liters or something, but yes, comparatively higher amount of water would be required for millets. Coming back to the first point that you said, what struck me was when you said that you were not in an urban area and yet it was a challenge to procure millets. So that's maybe where I'm coming from with this presentation. Yes, recipes, maybe Google is way better than what I can suggest with what you need to cook. But so this is a huge challenge because, like I said, we have not introduced health awareness. We have not introduced nutrition awareness per se with respect to how to cook, the pre-processing of millets, and what does millet go well with. Do you give achar with it or do you give dahi with it? That's a very standard question, and yes, we need to address that. And that is why probably the first half of my presentation was focused on that. We need a good awareness and we need experience. Until and unless you have that personal experience of which millet have you used which way, it is very easy to prescribe.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We can take only one question now. Can we pass the mic here?
You told about millets cannot be consumed by all. So, whom not to prescribe millet?
That would especially be for people suffering from CKD, chronic renal disease. Especially for them because the potassium and the sodium content would be much higher. Even with phosphorus, it becomes a challenge. So it's especially if you're looking at stage 3 and 4. So in those cases, millet is something that is not advisable.
So not other than CKD problems or any renal diseases?
Generally not, but again you'll have to, if you're looking at a clinical profile, then you will have to be more specific with the whole panel of the tests that are done for the patient, and it'll end up being more personalized. I'm talking about it from a public health perspective. So there we give a more generalized instruction. So in those cases, we generally say for people who have CKD not to be consuming this. We can add it becomes a lot of information, but we can add something like, it's rich in potassium. So anyone with hyperkalemia at least would be a challenge. Even with people who've got, let's say, cardiac failure, it would be a challenge for them as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know there are many questions, but due to paucity of time, we can only take 2. So I'm sure you can connect with ma'am later during the break. So thank you again, ma'am. And I request Dr. Kavita Menon, Professor, Head of Nutrition and Dietetics Program, Symbiosis Institute of Health Sciences, Symbiosis International University, to come onto the stage and felicitate Mansi, ma'am.